We did have a re-election for John Boehner as Speaker of the House, but there was some dissent. There were some defections. What does this say about how Congress is going to be able to operate going forward?
Well, Julie, I think one thing that it certainly says is that we have some real divisions within the Republican caucus, but that is certainly no surprise. House Speaker John Boehner has really been under attack from fiscal conservatives for how he handled the fiscal cliff debate. He's also been under attack from a lot of lawmakers from the Northeast for how he handled Hurricane Sandy and disaster relief. But ultimately today, House Speaker John Boehner did get those 220 votes that he needed to maintain his speakership. It was interesting, if you take a look at some of the Republicans, about 12 Republicans, House Republicans, either didn't vote or they voted for someone else. Eric Cantor, the majority leader, he got a few votes. Former Representative Allen West from Florida, a Tea Party member, he got a few votes. So it was interesting to look at who cast those votes. A couple of freshmen who consider themselves conservative, a few Republicans who had been ousted from their committee assignments. But generally, all of the leadership, Eric Cantor, for example, standing behind Boehner in the vote today. And House Speaker Boehner, when he took the gavel, gave a very conciliatory speech, a very inspiring speech. He actually got choked up a little bit, telling the Congress that it is time to rise. The 113th Congress, it is time to rise. And of course, they have some huge issues ahead, debt ceiling debate being one that's coming up in February. Julie?
So, Hans, when you look at this Congress, do you think that there will be more of a willingness to work with the White House? We did have Democrats gaining 8 seats in the November election. Is that a sign that there will be sort of more working with the Obama administration?
No. Unless John Boehner is serious about waiving the majority rule, which he did for this fiscal cliff vote, right? He took a bill, came from the Senate to the floor of the House that he knew a majority of his conference would not support. Unless John Boehner is serious about violating that principle for the next 2 years, and if he is, he might not be Speaker much longer, then I don't suspect a whole lot will change. Now, in some ways, a thinner majority for Boehner makes him more likely to rely on conservative votes because he has to get all of his members in line for crucial votes. So Boehner has a very difficult job. Let's not diminish that. It just got a little tougher.
Herding cats is one of the cliches that comes to mind.
That's for the Senate.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah, the herding cats is the Senate metaphor. Yeah.
Well, let's stick with the Congress here, the 113th Congress, what we're talking about. Megan, it's also setting a few records. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a really interesting freshman class and a really interesting congressional makeup. We've got 20 female senators. It's the first time that's ever happened. More openly gay lawmakers than in the past, more Latino lawmakers in the past. And as far as the women senators that I mentioned, you've got some women in leadership positions. Senator Patty Murray in a leadership position. You've got Senator Mazie Hirono. It's the first time that Hawaii has had a female senator. Also, she's the first Buddhist. So a really interesting makeup. But of course, when it comes down to the balance of power, we've still got Republicans controlling the House, Democrats controlling the Senate. Democrats picked up 8 seats in the House and 2 seats in the Senate. But in terms of any sort of tangible difference, I think we're going to see a lot of the same conflict. Julie?
Well, and speaking of conflict, of course, the debt ceiling negotiations are coming up. Hans, you broke news earlier that a key player won't be there, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. He's not going to be staying in his post. He doesn't want to be any part of these negotiations, it sounds like.
Well, in fairness to Secretary Geithner, Geithner has wanted to leave for a long time, and every time there's a crucial moment, the president leans on him and forces him to stay. This time, it seems like Geithner's departure date is set in stone. Having said that, he can always be talked back into saying that departure date is the end of January, right after the inaugural, and that means that the big debt ceiling fight that will take place in February, Tim Geithner will not be the Treasury Secretary for that crucial debate. That means he won't be negotiating with Capitol Hill. And almost as crucially, Julie, he won't be talking to international investors, international markets. It won't be Geithner that will be holding everyone's hand through what I suspect is going to be a very difficult and hairy negotiation.